Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and helps you live a more vibrant second half. Today, if you find us on YouTube, please don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss any more of these conversations. And if you're on a podcast platform, please subscribe and share. Today, we're going to be talking about our bodies and our health. My guest is passionate about helping women transform their lives through their nutrition and their weight loss journey. Our relationship with our bodies as women is sometimes very tenuous in the way that we feel. So her focus is self-discovery and healing the mind and body. My guest is Jess Reid. She is a certified life coach. She's the host of Self-Care Keto Podcast and the founder of the Keto Fit. Jess, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Gina. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Well, Jess, I know we talked a little bit before we hit record about the multi-passionate things that you are interested in, but I really wanted to hone in on this idea of us as women healing our relationships with our bodies and with food. And I'd love to know what it was that brought you to that specific passion in helping women.
Yeah, thank you. So much like anybody else that has a personal mission in life, a personal passion in life, it oftentimes comes out of your own personal pain, doesn't it?
Yes.
And so that's my story. I grew up as an overweight kid in the 1980s with a twin sister who is a fraternal twin. We did not look alike. She was the tall, skinny one, and I was the short, chubby one. And people felt totally free to comment on this in the 1980s, my mom, God bless her, she tried to help me in the best way that she knew, but that was to put me on a diet from like the age of 7. She taught me how to count calories. It was very just hurtful for my little mind that I couldn't comprehend how I would be eating the same things as my sister, but gaining weight looked different. And so my mom would have like a snack food list on the fridge for the babysitters, and it would say Jessica's snacks, like fat-free pretzels, frozen yogurt, and Julie's snacks was like potato chips and regular ice cream. And I was just internalizing all this from such a young age as there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. My body is fighting me. I am doomed to look like all the other women on my mom's side of the family. My mom struggled with her weight, all my aunts, my grandmothers, and so I was just internalizing all of these beliefs from such a young age, not even realizing that they were optional, right? Beliefs are optional. It's just our worldview, our conditioning, but we don't realize any of that. We're just taking it all in as capital T truth, as gospel. And so I internalized all of those messages from such a young age. And I always felt at war with my body. And I felt afraid of food. I felt like food was the enemy and that it wasn't fair. It was massively unfair. And that I would basically have to struggle with this my entire life. And I went about it through any means that I found available to me, through disordered eating. Now, I did lose weight in puberty, and I got to what I would consider now to be like a healthy weight range. Like I fell into a healthy BMI according to like doctors and things like that. But I struggled with body dysmorphia. I always saw myself as overweight. I always saw myself as the bigger girl. And I was comparing myself to like these little, 5'1" cheerleaders, size 0 pants is what I wanted to be. And, here I was a size 10 when I was a teenager, So I just struggled, even though I probably was at a healthy weight my whole teenage years and most of my young adult life. Again, it just felt like something that I could never shake. I had a running total of calories in my head every single day of my life for as long as I could remember, from the time that my mom taught me how to count calories until I finally stopped when I was like 28 years old. But gosh, that's 20 years of my life, always examining how many calories are in this food and evaluating everything, and either being like really, really strict with myself or in total like screw it mode, like total perfectionism, or it's like the all or nothing mentality that we all know so well, right? So that was most of my adult life. And I went through a traumatic event when I was in my late 20s. I packed on about 40 pounds in the course of a year. And now I was like so depressed. I was completely just hiding out from my life, literally was like turning down social invitations. I remember trying on like 6 outfits in the morning and just crying, didn't want to go to work. and really just like shaming myself, so disgusted with myself. It was really, really awful. In 2013, so this was 10 years ago now, but in 2013, much like any other fad diet that I would approach, here I went. It was 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and I approached Atkins. And so I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this, but it's a low carb way of eating. And the reason that I approached this is because I used to see my mom and aunts do this when I was in high school, and they would do Atkins during the week to like lose 5 pounds, but then they would just stop on the weekend and eat like pizza or whatever. And so it was never like a full on lifestyle. It was literally just a fad diet. And I didn't care. I just was like, I need to lose 10 pounds as quickly as possible, because I was carrying so much body shame about having gained that weight. And I was going to see my family at the holidays. And I was so afraid that everybody was just going to be judging me and evaluating my body. Really, that's what I was doing to myself. But here I started off with Atkins back in November of 2013. I did lose 10 pounds in those first 2 weeks, but what I did not expect was how different and incredible I would feel. It set off a change in my brain, a change in my body chemistry, a change in my digestion, a change in my hormones that at the time I didn't understand anything about the science behind what was happening, but I was elated. I was like, wow, because I had lost 10 pounds through calorie restriction before, but there was something different about this. I felt so incredibly energized and happy. And the most important thing I felt was food freedom. For the first time in my life, I no longer wanted to snack after dinner. Like I felt satisfied. We call that satiety. And I didn't know at all the mechanisms for any of that, but now I understand that it has a lot more to do with finally fueling my body for the first time with healthy protein and healthy fats, things that I was never taught about. I was only ever taught calories. That's all that like a 200 calorie Snicker bar was equivalent to me as a turkey sandwich. Like I saw no difference between those things. So this got me so curious that I started to dive into the science and understand all of what was actually happening behind the scenes. And I started to become really personally passionate about this. Like I felt like I had discovered something magical, and how could no one have ever told me about this before?
Yeah.
And what it really did was it freed up a lot of the pain that I was going through every single day. The shame and the self-disgust and the loathing and the endless cycle of like, I'm going to do better tomorrow, and then start off restricting the whole rest of the day and then failing by the end of the day. And just like, it consumed everything in my brain, just thinking about this every single day. And so when this, like, I felt this was no longer plaguing me, it created all of this mental bandwidth for me to actually be like, whoa, I've had a really screwed up relationship with food and weight and body image my whole life. And I started to leverage some of that newfound mental capacity to start to really do some healing work with myself. I got into therapy, and I started doing personal development work and personal growth and reading books. And I started to really change from the inside out. It didn't take me very long until I was like, I want to do this for other women. And so I imagined probably about 3 years in, I started, writing like a little curriculum, like, what could I do? I want to bring together like this idea of like be a nutritionist and a therapist combined and do something to help other women with this. And that's when I started my coaching practice in 2017 called the Keto Fit. And now I do coach much more expansively than that. I still do that, and I love it so much. And it's about, I do unapologetically call myself a weight loss coach, because I think we need to stop shaming people who do want to lose weight. Like more power to, like, I'm all about like, yeah, if you don't want to lose weight, there's no need to lose weight. Like we used to shame people like for being fat. Like, and so now we're like, but now we're shaming people for wanting to do something about like actually take control of their health. Right.
Yes.
And so I do unapologetically call myself a weight loss coach, but I believe it's about so much more than that. It's not about body objectification, like trying to lose weight to actually get your body to be well evaluated by someone else. It's more about you feeling authentic, you feeling like your body actually represents who you are when you look in the mirror, and having the energy and the capacity and the confidence to live out the purpose that you feel like you have for your life. And so many of us are unable to do that because of the shame that we're carrying. And so that's really the inner work that I love to do with my clients. Yes, I love to teach them like these things actually help you to lose weight, but also, why we could Google these things. Why are we not doing the things that we know we could be doing? Well, we usually have a very good reason. Typically what we call self-sabotage is actually some form of self-protection, some form of self-soothing. It comes from a very good, loving place inside of us. And I really like to help women find self-awareness and self-compassion so we can stop being at war with ourselves over this.
Mm. You mentioned seeing food as the enemy.
Yeah.
Not understanding the purpose of food.
Yeah.
And, we do have a lot of issues around food. And you growing up in the 80s, I know I was in high school in the 80s, but there was a huge push in that time against fat.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was fat-free. That's when the whole fat-free thing really hit the market.
Yeah.
And so much has been learned about the importance of fat for our brain health. I mean, there's studies done. This is a little side note. There's been studies done on like dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And the fat our brain needs and interesting things like that. So let's talk a little bit about what healthy food looks like, because I think even that is because people, like you said, are afraid of food.
Yeah.
So what is truly healthy food? What are the foods that get you to feel satiated and not feeling like you never quite have enough food in your body?
Yeah, that's such a fantastic question. The first thing that I would say, as far as like what is actually healthy food, and again, this is my personal opinion, but it also is based off of years of experience. And I do hold a nutrition certification from the American Nutrition Association and ketogenic nutrition training. But more heavily, I am actually trained as a life coach. I have a master's degree in life coaching and an active credential as a certified life coach. But I really think it's holistic. We need both. But to answer your question directly, I'll tell you a little bit about my philosophy on healthy eating. And so for the most part, I take an ancestral eating approach. So in essence, what is healthy is foods that have existed for our ancestors for hundreds and thousands of years, right? This is what our bodies are used to eating and are evolved to handle well. So anything that came from the earth, if it's an animal or a plant that grew out of the earth, then essentially that's healthy. Now, we are designed to be omnivorous, but I think that some people approach more of a carnivorous type of diet and do a lot better with that. More people approach more of a plant-based diet and do better with that. But obviously our bodies are designed and our ancestors have functioned by eating both. I don't demonize one approach over another. I think that people should explore and see what works best for them. But I think, whether you want to be a carnivore or whether you want to be a vegan, like you could still fall under eat real food, essentially, and avoid all of the packaged stuff that is made in a lab and is literally designed to get you addicted to it.
Yes.
So literally, food scientists have discovered what is called the bliss point. And it's this combination of sweet, and this could even be sugar-free sweet, because I see these keto packaged foods on the market all the time. And you want to overeat those too. I don't know if anybody's ever ventured into that, but like, one of those keto bars, like I could eat like 3 of those things, but like, because it's this bliss point is this combination of sweet taste, saltiness, and high fat. And that is literally like, it lights your brain on fire, produces such a dopamine, like pleasure chemical response that our brains are very smart. We're designed to avoid pain and approach pleasure. And your brain says, give me more of that right now, and it sets off this like chemical and hormonal reaction in your body that you cannot willpower over. But we blame our own willpower on it, or we call it emotional eating. But really, the roots of it are physiological. Nobody emotionally eats on apples or eggs or steak, right? And so, yes, I definitely believe that there is something to emotional eating. I've struggled with it as well, but I think a lot of times we blame us being weak-willed, having some type of a personal problem, or like our emotions, when really it's the food's fault.
The one thing I'd like to touch on is fat.
Yes,
because I think that has been demonized. I mean, you and I both, even though you're younger than me, that whole conversation around fat was really demonized. And they're finding, brain scientists are telling us you have to have good, healthy fat. So let's talk a little bit about fat.
Sure, let's do that. So essentially, funny, I use the word essentially, but so there are what's called essential fatty acids. These are fats that your body absolutely needs and cannot manufacture them endogenously inside of your own body. You have to get them from your dietary intake. There are also essential amino acids. This is protein. And so again, your body cannot manufacture this on its own. You have to get it from your diet. If you don't, you will experience disease. You will experience nutritional deficit in your body if you do not get essential fatty acids and essential amino acids. It's going to cause some type of issue inside of your body, whether that be chronic inflammation, whether that be a nutritional deficiency. It's going to impact your mood. It's going to impact your mental health. It's going to impact your bone health, your physical health, your digestive health, something. And so the funny thing is that there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. And so all foods are either made up of protein, fats, and carbs. And so 2 of those are essential and 1 of them is not. And yet, here we are basically being pushed to eat high carbohydrate foods constantly, and especially packaged, convenience, high carbohydrate foods. And I don't demonize carbohydrates. I eat plenty of fruit now. I eat, like if it grew from the ground, sweet potatoes, carrots, vegetables, anything like that. Those have carbohydrates in them. But when we hear the word carbs, we tend to associate that with like high carb foods like pasta, potato chips, rice, all of these types of things. And when we don't have that imbalance with protein and fats, then our bodies actually get all out of whack and we become what's called insulin resistant. And we're unable to process the sugar, the carbohydrates that our body is taking in. And essentially it gets stored as fat, and now everybody's overweight. So, but to answer your question directly about essential fatty acids, and I would also say pay close attention to protein as well, because so many of us as women especially are protein deficient. And this is responsible for so much, including our mental health. And again, I don't demonize vegetarians or vegans, because I actually used to be one. I was a vegetarian for 5 years, and for 2 of those years I was a vegan, but I was very uneducated about protein and fat and all of those things. And I essentially just ate anything. I was like, well, if it doesn't have anything animal in it, I'm good. I'm good to eat it. And that was my only,
parameter.
Basically filter. Yeah. Filter parameter. So I think you can be very healthy. There are ways to get plenty of healthy fats, of course, but also ways to get lots of healthy protein based on plants. But so many vegetarians and vegans struggle with mental health issues because they're not getting enough protein. So yeah, I would actually group the 2 of those things as just as important: essential fatty acids and essential amino acids. Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how we are being conditioned with the food pyramid versus what knowing our own bodies and understanding ourselves well enough, how different those things are. And knowing like you're talking about complex carbs and simple carbs when you talk about like the grains and whatnot, right? And I know some people that are totally fine with the simple carbs. In other words, their bodies don't seem to have the same reactions as other people, where it makes them feel heavy and bloated and gassy. And so I wanted to kind of zoom out and say, I agree wholeheartedly. If it's from the earth, eating from the earth, it doesn't pass through a process that's man-made, then it's healthy for us. But I feel like there's a lot of confusion around this idea of what is good for me versus, this is what everybody should do. And I think it's not quite that broad, is it?
Yes, I agree. We're all definitely bio-individual. There's a lot of different theories out there. Some of it could be based off of genetics, but certainly a lot of it is based off of the conglomeration of how our lifestyle has affected our body up to this point. And so right now, your body might not be able to handle carbohydrates very well because you're insulin resistant. You have high A1C, you have high fasting blood sugar. These are markers, high cholesterol. These are markers letting you know your body's literally like showing you evidence that you have right now, temporarily, an intolerance to high carbohydrate. It's almost like when you've gotten sick and you need like a round of antibiotics, right? Like you're not going to have to take those antibiotics for the rest of your life. You need to take them as a therapeutic protocol to bring your body back into a state of health. And it's the same way with perhaps following a low carb diet. Some people might want to eat that way for the rest of their life. I know I feel my best off that, but even for people who don't want to do that forever, if you look at it as a healing protocol, not a lifetime sentence, you'd be like, certainly, I'll do whatever it takes to bring my body back into a state of healing. And now I can eat much more liberally of things like fruit and sweet potatoes and things like that, for a period of time, I avoided it so that I could heal my body's insulin resistance. And you can literally see the difference in how your body metabolizes that by even testing your blood sugar. And you can see like, oh, wow, like my body cannot handle carbohydrates right now. Like I just ate an apple after this meal and my blood sugar went sky high. But now here I am, 3 years after the fact, and I've actually healed my body, and like it's a normal blood sugar level. So it's pretty cool that you actually have tools that can show you how your body is responding to different things. But I would say that's such a message of hope that I try to deliver to women, because a lot of times we think like, well, and there's value to this. Like, I'm not going to do anything that I feel like I can't take on as a lifestyle forever. The value in that is like, yeah, don't do some stupid crash diet. That's not realistic for you, right? Like, don't do HCG. Like you can't do that for the rest of your life.
Right.
But on the flip side, we might be taking it to the extreme. There is a lot of value in sometimes being like, okay, this is what it takes me temporarily. Like I have to do this for 3 months or 6 months or whatever to bring my body back into a healed state, kind of like doctor's orders. And then it won't have to be forever. That can bring a lot of hope to people as well.
I had a guest on, his name is Vinny Tortorich, and he talked about no sugar, no grains, in terms of a way of healing our bodies when they're metabolically broken. And I reheard him on another podcast, and he was talking about, if you're metabolically broken, a 30-day no sugar, no grain will heal to what you're talking about. And I love that languaging, because we're looking at food as our partner and our fuel. It's not an enemy. And I wanted to ask you a question about, so we're talking about when our bodies are out of balance. It's not like I'm broken, something's wrong with me. It's just like, okay, my gut is out of balance. Something's not right. And I take a protocol, to your point, a temporary protocol to give my body a chance to heal. Yeah. And I hear that, and I think that's a very hopeful message. But beyond that, how do you help women with this part, the brain, the thinking, the mindset? Because our mind-gut connection, right? Our brain-gut connection, how we feel about food is probably impacting how our body is handling the food we put in. So let's talk a little bit about that kind of invisible side of eating and food.
Sure. Yeah. And it really, what you're saying really links together with what I was telling you about struggling with body dysmorphia. Because there's this expression, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And so I wasn't seeing myself through a realistic lens. I was seeing myself literally through a lens of self-disgust, self-hatred, through the lens of my conditioning. And even once my body changed, I still saw myself in the same way because my consciousness hadn't changed. My beliefs hadn't changed. And so I'm still seeing all of reality. I'm perceiving reality through the lens of my beliefs about myself. And it's the same thing with our relationship with food, our relationship with our body image, our relationship with weight and the scale, and really anything in our lives. We are filtering all of that in through the lens of our beliefs. And so I like to explain to my clients that we are basically like an onion. And so the outermost layer that is visible is your behavior. I'm sorry, no, even take that, your results, right? And so it's your outward results, how much money you make, what the number on the scale says, what size your pants are, whatever kind of like outward visible result that is measurable, right? And so right underneath the layer of your results is your behavior. And so this is where we typically just camp out. We're like, if I want different results, I just have to change my behavior. And so how do I change my behavior? Through willpower, through motivating myself, through shaming myself, through scaring myself, right? And so we think that that's what's going to help us to change our behavior. And these things work temporarily. Behavior modification can work temporarily through things like fear, force, and shame, right? But it's just short-lived. The only energy in the universe that is infinite is love. And so underneath the layer of our behavior, what's underneath that? What's driving our behavior? It's our thoughts and our feelings. And what's driving our thoughts and our feelings? It's our beliefs. So our belief is the core of the onion. Where do our beliefs come from? They come from our conditioning. What we learned about the world from usually, primarily, all of our worldview is like getting programmed into us between the ages of 0 and 7. From our primary caregivers, not that they're trying to hurt you, harm you, or whatever. They're just passing on the worldview that they see the world. That's how they see the world. And so we're just passing it on generation after generation after generation. And so, of course, all the women that I talk to, if they have a disordered relationship with their food, chances are their mother did, their aunts did, their big sister did, their cousin did, whatever, or we're just getting it from society, like from MTV or from the magazines or just whatever it might be. But it's like the air that we breathe, the water in the fish tank. We're like, what's water? Like, we don't even notice. Like, it's just what we were raised in. And so this is what I do with my clients is essentially follow a process of awareness, compassion, then shedding and receiving. So awareness is about self-awareness. What are your beliefs? Where did they come from? And we get all the way down to that level. And I actually have some assessments that I actually can give to my clients that are like fun psychological quizzes that it's like, here are your beliefs. And it's like, oh my God, yes. Like things like, perfectionism, or, we would call them unrelenting standards, or people pleasing, abandonment, like seeing everything through the lens of like, oh, everyone's always abandoning me, or just defectiveness, which is another word for shame. Basically like submitting yourself to other people, like always going with the flow, people pleasing. There's so many different they're called schemas or beliefs. This is the lens through which we've kind of like see the world, and immediately moving from that awareness into compassion, because a lot of us are aware of all of our stuff, but we don't have any compassion for it. We're like, well, everybody goes through stuff. I should be over this by now. That happened to me 20 years ago, whatever it might be. And we kind of like minimize it. We don't hold self-compassion. And so when we get into where this actually came from, how long you've been dealing with it, and that it's not your fault. Like you didn't ask for these beliefs. They were just literally like piled on top of you.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the food atmosphere, right? Like it's not your body's fault, it's the environment. Like nobody taught you about nutrition. Nobody taught you how to regulate your emotions through any other means than, oh, don't cry, here's a lollipop, or let's go out to dinner, or, whatever it might be. Like this is also part of our conditioning. And it's really, really hard to get to release, like shed those things, unless we first have awareness about it and then also compassion about it. Because again, like if you don't have love, you can't let it go. If you want to let something go, you have to love it first. Not love it in the sense that like, oh, love it, I want to keep it, but love it in the sense of like, man, I really feel compassion for myself. I feel compassion for that younger version of me that didn't have the tools to filter that out, didn't know any other way, didn't have any other option. And so of course I'm going to do what was modeled to me, or of course I'm going to soothe myself with the resources that I had available to me to get through all of that hard stuff that I got through. And in fact, I'm grateful for it. It served me for a little while, but now it no longer serves me. Now I actually have the capacity to try to learn some new tools and bring in some new ways of being. And I don't want to just go on autopilot with the beliefs that have been, given to me. I actually want to choose helpful beliefs that are going to open up the world of possibilities that I want for myself. So yeah, this is what I do with the mindset work with my clients.
It's really powerful what we think and what we believe, and becoming aware, right? The awareness of these things, and sometimes listening to the things we say to ourselves and what the people around us are saying, because it is really powerful. We have an identity. One of the things that I've heard in my own family, our family is big boned. We come from good farmer stock or whatever, which may or may not be true. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there are so many different body types in the world. And that's something sometimes just to step back and look at, be in a crowd of people and you got this beauty standard, let's say, and then you look at reality and there's no comparison. Yeah. Nobody looks like that reality, that surreal reality of, oh, this is the ideal of beauty. Because you change countries, the ideal of beauty changes, everything changes. And so I think as women, we've become very caught up in these ideas of beauty, and like to your point, perfectionism or looking a certain way equals our value. And I think when you earlier on we're talking about our body image and food is our enemy, I feel like it's a dysfunctional relationship where we have to blame something, right? We're either going to blame our genetics or we're going to blame the food. And I feel like what you're talking about really comes down to dealing with our minds first, like you were saying, those belief systems.
Mhm.
Now, what happens for people in your experience when they begin to unravel all of these tangled beliefs and they get a more balanced perspective on the reality of their body in this space and who they really at their best, most optimal can be?
Yeah. What a fantastic question. Yeah, and just to address what you're talking about with like blaming the genetics or blaming the environment. Um, I'm sure maybe some of your listeners have heard this before, but one thing that I've always found to be really comforting and share with my clients is this concept that like genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And we're understanding even more and more now what's called epigenetics. And epigenetics is how your lifestyle choices literally impact your DNA, even that gets passed on to your kids. And so you can break these generational curses. You can end these generational cycles by literally turning off certain things in your genes that get passed on, or it's no longer affecting you because the signaling is just turned off. So yes, every woman in my family is overweight, but I'm not. And I used to be. Like my twin sister is now actually overweight. She was the one that was, skinny when we were growing up. But if you continue on with that way of eating, a lot of times it catches up with you eventually, right? And so even if we did have different DNA, like I grew up being taught like, oh, you have a slow metabolism and she doesn't. It's like, well, okay. But, given the environment, over and over and over again, consistently just, eating all of this packaged food and high carb stuff and not really filtering through it and making choices that are about satiety and healthy fats and healthy proteins, like the environment will override even your good DNA. So there's just so much to it. To answer your question about how do I see my clients changing once we start to get to the root of the beliefs, one thing that I've always found so incredibly beautiful is this concept of being disgusted with your body. So this concept of being disgusted with your body, you actually think that it's because of how your body looks. But what I see happen time and time again with my clients is that as soon as they actually start taking care of themselves, from literally fueling their body differently from a place of self-care and starting to open up to some of this awareness and this compassion, maybe they've lost 10 pounds in a couple of weeks, but they no longer feel self-disgust. How? It's because we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And so it's not necessarily your body that is causing the self-disgust. I believe that it is the lack of self-trust. It's the self-betrayal that is causing the self-disgust. You're disgusted with what you perceive as your inability to do what you say you're going to do. Not so much about how your body looks. It's that you feel hopeless because you feel like you have no power to do what you want to do. And that's a lie. And so, yes, you do have that power inside of you, but it helps a heck of a lot to get the environment on your side. So you do have agency and free will inside of you. You can make choices. You can decide, I am going to do something different. And if you're continuing to put yourself in an environment, it's almost like an alcoholic who decides to stop drinking, but then still goes to the bar every night and sits there and is like, I'm not going to drink, right? You can design your environment for success to make it so much easier for you to actually do the things that you want to do. And that does look like choosing not to eat certain foods that are like a gateway food for you, right? Like, it's like, I can't eat just 12 chips, even though that's the serving size on the container. I don't know who can, but some people can. Some people literally can. I'm like, I wish I could be like you, like that, like moderation. And these are the people that say everything in moderation. And it's like, well, you don't know my brain. My brain doesn't work like everything in moderation, right? Like my genetics are different. My mentality is different. I don't know, whatever it is, but for me, that doesn't work. And so for me, it's actually easier to abstain and just to say, I'm not going to eat any chips, at least, for this period of time. Like, and I call this concept food boundaries instead of food restrictions, because our language is so important. A restriction is something that is an external authority placing something on top of you, and you're submitting your own internal authority to that. A boundary is something that comes from your own internal authority that you decide to give to yourself to amplify the pleasure and the safety inside of your life. And so you set boundaries with maybe toxic people in your life or whatever it might be. How do you know who to set boundaries with? Based on past experience. I do the same thing with food. Like, think about the different foods that you consume on a regular basis. How do you feel when you interact with that food? This is your relationship with food. How does this food make you feel in your physical gut, in your energy levels, in your mood? Does it feel like it lights your brain on fire and it erodes at your self-trust to consume this food? Well, then we might want to set a boundary surrounding that. And it doesn't mean never, but a concept that I do with my clients for food boundaries, I like to have them like create like a dartboard. And so in the center is the bullseye. And this is the optimal of what we're aiming for, especially if weight loss is the goal. Like, yes, safety and pleasure, but also what is going to help me get me closer to my weight loss goal. But then, that's such a narrow definition of success that most of us are just walking around with just a bullseye. We're like, perfect or nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We're like, oops, I ate, 55 carbs instead of 50 carbs today. Might as well eat 400, right? It's just so silly that we're walking around with such a narrow view of success. And so this expands the all or nothing mentality and gets you out of the perfectionism, because on the dartboard, you still have two other circles there except for the bullseye, right? And so I call this the sometimes circle and the rarely circle. And so sometimes, maybe on the weekends, I consume this food. Maybe, and rarely, like when I'm on vacation or I go to a wedding or when I have family in town, whatever it might be, a birthday, an anniversary, things like that. And so, but the value of that is that you pre-plan what your definition of success is based off of the circumstance, instead of just having this all or nothing mentality. And when you do what you say you're going to do, you could be eating the same exact food. But if you're like, I'm not going to eat cake, and then you go to the party and you eat the cake, versus, oh, I have pre-planned for this. This falls into my rarely circle. It's an anniversary. I am going to eat a healthy meal, and then I'm going to have one piece of cake. In both scenarios, you ate one piece of cake, but you feel completely differently about it. You either feel like a failure that you betrayed yourself, or you feel totally successful, like you gave something to yourself instead of took it for yourself. So it's a total energetic difference. But yeah, I hope I answered your question about just like the things that I see changing inside of my clients is how differently they feel about themselves and how differently they feel about their relationship with food and weight and body image by starting to make some of these mindset tweaks.
It's pretty powerful. And I'm wondering, do those tweaks and those shifts in the way they view themselves, do those things actually free up their body's ability to achieve those goals?
I believe so, because there's so much power in momentum. And the thing about mindsets, and the conditioning, it's like, it's going to come back. There are grooves, almost like snow tires, that have, like, we've gone down this path so many times in our mind that these are these deep grooves of memory and habit and familiarity inside of our brains. And so, especially when we get stressed, or when our nervous systems go into that fight or flight mode, what our brain offers to us is familiarity. And so it's going to, these old mindsets or these old schemas or these beliefs, they're going to revisit us, right? Yeah. But I say, you can't stop a bird from landing on your head, but you can stop it from building a nest there. Yeah. And so it's not how often you get revisited by this familiar pattern, like, oh, you should do this, or I feel like doing this right now. Or even if you did, right? Even if you did go down that old path again, don't judge yourself by how often those schemas or beliefs revisit you. Judge yourself by how quickly you're able to move down into a new path, like how quickly you're able to recover. And we don't need to make it mean whatever we're making it mean. This, like, I call this dirty pain. Like there's clean pain and there's dirty pain. Clean pain is like the kind of pain that is just built into the human experience: grief, loss, misunderstandings, failure, disappointment, the pain of where you are versus where you want to be. Like, these are all just part of the human experience. Dirty pain is the story that we layer on top of it. Things like, it's not meant for me, or God doesn't trust me enough with this, or what's the point? You're never going to succeed anyway, or I'm too weak, or I'm too undisciplined, or my body is broken. My body is fighting me. It's futile. Just give up. Like these stories that we layer on top of it are what I call dirty pain. This is optional. But even understanding from a place of self-compassion that when your brain offers you dirty pain, it's still a loving thing. Like there's this loving part of you that's trying to say, like, I just want to put you out of your misery. I just want to rescue you from this suffering. So just stop trying. But that's not really how it works. That doesn't actually ever make it go away, right? Because we've all tried that a million times. We try, I'm just done. I'm just done. I'm never weighing myself again. I don't care. I'm going to eat everything. I'm just going to like intuitively eat or just whatever. We all try to do that a million times, and then it doesn't work and we're still feeling the same way.
It's so multi-layered, but it's like I've talked to other people about like food addiction. It's like food is a necessity.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we come into a healthy relationship with it because you need it to survive. Like it's not like alcohol where you don't actually need alcohol. You don't actually need, these other things. So I think it's very fascinating. So if you were to give 3 kind of key points to my listeners, what 3 things would you really want them to take to heart?
So definitely the aspect of awareness, which is that, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are, meaning we see things through the lens of our beliefs, and our behavior is never going to change long-term unless we're actually able to get down to the core of our beliefs and start to shift some of those things. So how could you do that? Well, certainly you could do this through a journal, through like journaling and self-discovery, but it's really, really helpful to have a mirror to help you, a coach or a therapist. And, a lot of people might not have the ability to maybe work with either one of those. I have some self-paced coaching programs on my website that people can check out, but there are just so many resources online. Even if you just like listen to a podcast every week and then journal about what came to you, but actually start to do some inner work and try to get down to the layer of your beliefs. Like just ask yourself simple things like, what was I taught about food growing up? Like imagine the things that maybe a coach or a therapist might ask you, and start to do some of these questions with yourself and ask yourself like, okay, I have this belief that no matter what I do, I'm always going to be overweight. And then like start to question that, like, is that really true? Okay, give me the evidence of why that's true. But now give me the evidence of why that might not be true, right? Like, have I ever seen somebody else my size go to this, or someone who, has anyone else in my family has recovered their health? Like just look for evidence and try to expand beyond the level of that just myopic belief. Like these are just glasses that I'm wearing that's filtering out the evidence. Like your beliefs are like the Google filter for your brain. And we all have this filter in our brains. It's called our reticular activating system. It's like a real filter in your brain.
Yeah.
And you can prime it. You can, start to practice affirmations of what you do want to believe. And then your brain will start giving you evidence of those things being true. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is remember the compassion piece. This is a quote that I have always held on to, and it says, everything is either an act of love or a cry for love. It's either an act of love or a cry for love. And so if you're a parent and you're listening to this, right, a lot of times if we've done any kind of like work or like growth around parenting, positive parenting, you always hear like, well, all misbehavior is just communication, right? And so your kid is trying to tell you something that they need more power, they need more attention, they need something, right? They don't necessarily know how to communicate it. And so it's coming out as misbehavior. Like apply that to yourself. Like show curiosity, like, okay, I'm misbehaving, meaning I keep doing this thing that I don't want to be doing. I'm doing this thing over and over again that I keep saying that I'm not going to do it anymore. Show curiosity. Like, okay, this is either an act of love. Some part of me is trying to take care of myself by doing this thing, or it's a cry for love. Like some part of me is saying like, help me. I need something extra that I'm not getting. And a lot of times, we are self-soothing with food because there's an unmet need elsewhere. And this has just become the substitute. So an unmet need for true pleasure in your life. A lot of us, food has become the only source of pleasure in our lives, and it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Yeah.
Maybe an unmet need for more rest or relaxation because we're just running on, 10, 12, 20 all day long, and our nervous system is asking for a break. And when we eat, it stimulates our vagus nerve, which helps our nervous system to switch states from an activated state into a rest and digest. That's why it's called rest and digest. And so there's literally something happening where our body is trying to serve us. It's trying to take care of us. And so remember that with self-compassion, all parts of you are good. It's either an act of love or a cry for love. And then the last thing that I would say is specifically surrounding food and body, to have the energy of giving this to yourself, then you will not wind up in the energy of taking it for yourself. And so treat yourself the same way that maybe you would with your kid. Like, I'm raising a 6-year-old daughter, right? Or a child that you love if you're not a parent. Would you ever say to your kid, you ate way too much yesterday, so you don't get to eat today? Like, can you imagine how heartbreaking that would be to say to my 6-year-old daughter? Like, no, you had way too much ice cream last night. You have to skip breakfast today before you go to school. You have to go to school hungry. Like, I want to cry just thinking about it. Like, and that's how we treat ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about nutrition for my daughter, I think about what can I give her to help her feel good today, to help her feel energized today, to help her body be calm today, to not get too wired, right? Like, I know that if I give her a bunch of crap and sugar, then she's going to like totally have a hard day at school, probably cry at the drop of a hat and misbehave, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with ourselves, to have the energy of like, how can I give myself the best nutrition? And then when my daughter wants sugar, my answer to her is yes, and practice this with yourself. Like, yes, and is not like, okay, I want a piece of pizza. It's not like, okay, well, we're having pizza tonight and that's it. Like, what would it look like to still give yourself protein? Like, whenever we have pizza night at home, I make my daughter still have some kind of protein, because there's like, I mean, there's hardly any protein on pizza, maybe a little bit in the pepperoni or whatever, but like, we're going to have some grilled chicken first, and then you can have your piece of pizza. But my response with her is like, yes, and I'm not taking anything away from her. I'm giving it to her. And so when we approach ourselves with the energy of giving something to ourselves, whatever it is that you want, say yes and to yourself. If you're struggling with the food boundaries or whatever, like, all of us can have an approach goal instead of an avoid goal. So it's like, yes, sure, you want the ice cream, you want the pizza, you want those French fries or whatever. Okay, how can I practice yes and with myself? How can I have the energy of giving to myself? I'm going to make sure that I have my grilled chicken, and then I'm going to have my French fries. And not only is this energetic, but it actually is like super effective nutritionally, because you're going to have your protein first. It's going to buffer the blood sugar spike. It's going to increase satiety. And so there's so much protective mechanisms happening there, hormonally, chemically, physiologically, as well as the energetics and the emotions that you're going to experience from it.
Wonderful. So, Jess, how can people find you?
Thank you so much. Yes. So my website is jess-reid.com. That's REID. And again, today we've mainly talked about healing relationship with food and body, but I coach more expansively than that as well. I also help coach women to heal their relationship with money, to heal their relationship with their faith. And for those who are entrepreneurial minded or just want to start receiving abundance in exchange for your spiritual gifts, I work with women who want to do that as well. So all of that is listed on jess-reid.com, and you'll be able to find, if you're specifically interested in the weight loss coaching, you'll find all of the details there. I also have a free resource that I'd love to share with your audience, if that's okay.
Yes.
So once a month, I do a free instant download that's available, and it's called Mind Cleanse and Manifest. So you're clearing out, shedding one of these old, unhelpful, self-sabotaging beliefs to make room for a new belief that you want to call in to help attract the life that you actually want for yourself. It's a different topic every single month, and you can get that at bit.ly/mind cleanse and manifest.
Awesome. Fantastic. And you also have a podcast, right?
I do. Yes. It's called the Self-Care Keto Podcast.
All right. Awesome. Well, Jess, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show today and for sharing such a compassionate conversation around food and body image, and vulnerably sharing your own story, because I think, that is a big part of the impact that you're able to have, because you have been there yourself. And I really appreciate your transparency and your compassion and your kindness around this conversation. Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for bringing this message to my audience today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Friends, today, if you find us on YouTube, all you have to do is look down below. All the links to Jess will be there. If you happen to be driving, you can head to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 334, and you will find all of the links there. Friends, this is one of those ongoing conversations as women that we have with ourselves and with our girlfriends. Who hasn't been to a baby shower or a bridal shower where everyone's pretending not to be hungry? You know, nobody wants to be the first one to have a bite of food. There's so much shame and guilt around food. This conversation is a reminder that food is our friend. Our bodies are a gift, and how we relate to our own bodies and food is a huge part of our emotional and mental health. And it's okay to eat food. And it's okay to investigate how you feel about those things. And if you need support around this, if it's just too difficult for you to do alone because of the belief systems that you have, that's okay too. You can reach out to someone like Jess and you can get the support that you need to put your feet on the path to a healthier relationship with yourself, your body, and your food. Food is fuel, my friends, and when we eat well, we live well. Our life ripples out, and we have such a great impact in our communities, our families, and beyond. So please, if this is something that really touches you, please take the time to share this with another woman. Make sure that this conversation doesn't end with you. Let's get this healthy, hopeful, healing conversation out to the community. Thank you for sharing this. And thank you again for being with us today and for subscribing, rating, sharing, doing what you can to make sure that this community continues to grow. Thank you for coming out with us today, for listening. I look forward to sharing more inspirational people, messages, and content in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.